Here is a list of things that simply do not make sense to me, or maybe they make perfect sense, depending upon one's perspective. I'll try not to get caught up in too much detail as to possible reasons for these discrepancies. You can make your own minds up as to whether it deems further investigation or not. Like many other people, I am merely interested in finding the truth and nothing more. 1. The shape of the Earth and other NASA oddities. All NASA photos of the Earth are generated from data. The famous shot of the Earth from the Moon was pasted in place and is a fake, yet we are expected to believe that it is real. The size of the continents varies greatly across all image versions released, and the same cloud formations are simply copied and pasted in place. The curvature of the Earth is not evident across great distances. Mountains and high structures can be seen hundreds of miles away, when they should, according to science, be well below the curve. The only reason I've heard about this is that it's possibly caused by light refraction, which I find hard to believe. Aircraft do not allow for any curvature during flight. Engineers do not allow for curvature across great distances. People across the world have taken photos of the Moon at exactly the same time, when in fact it should not be in view for some. This was performed in a Facebook group I joined for a time, and I was amazed at how consistently it occurred. If the Sun is a distant star as scientists believe, then why are the Sun's rays angled and not straight, suggesting that it is in fact more likely to be local? A point worth making here is to raise the question, why are so many people in on the lie? And I would suggest that we are all very much indoctrinated into believing the globe theory. When viewing other stars and planets, we also naturally assume that we are on one too. The relationship between astrology and the stars has remained constant for millennia. How can this be if we are racing through space? Why do so many organizations use a flat Earth map in their emblems? In 1969, we landed on the Moon. Since then, NASA has lost all of the data and has now said that they cannot leave Earth's low orbit. I consider ISIS videos to be an absolute joke, with many shots of green screens and harnesses clearly visible, and lots of hairspray. Spacewalks showing water bubbles rising up towards the surface, as well as the instance recently of the astronaut having water entering into his helmet. Elon Musk's now infamous quote of "It's real because it looks fake" is simply astonishing. Incidentally, NASA is the biggest consumer of helium in the world. Also noteworthy is the India moon landing. I honestly think that one was just to test how dumb we all really are. Go watch it if you haven't seen it already. Another interesting fact is regarding the German scientists, over 1,600 of them, that the US intelligence drafted in after World War II, laying the foundation for NASA. This subject is somewhat divisive, with much vitriol being used across social media. Many people clearly going out of their way to shut people down, instead of engaging in a peaceful and logical manner, or just letting them get on with it. It really is a topic that generates a kind of mob mentality. I would strongly suggest not engaging with trolls, and try to use the time researching for yourself and speaking to like-minded people. Maybe the absolute truth will emerge from all of the theoretical pseudoscience, or maybe the more fringe speculation will shed more light on perhaps the most fascinating topic of all. At least that's my perspective anyway. Watch Eric Dubay or Flat Earth Dave for more info. Be wary of some flat Earth groups, as many have been set up simply to muddy the waters. I've also just started reading work by another medium writer called Lone Light, a very apt pseudonym, and he's covered pretty much the whole topic at some length and continues to do so. Check out his work if you need more detail on this topic. One final thought on this subject and all of its inconsistencies. It doesn't really matter what shape the Earth actually is. What does matter is the level of censorship and triggering it seems to attract. Big Tech, discussed later, really doesn't want this topic talked about. The amount of attention given to the flat Earth conspiracy theory in recent months is quite amazing to say the least. I've seen many podcasts especially, where non-believers enter the conversation highly skeptical, and after several hours, at the very least agree that there needs to be more discussion, and very often it leaves a person feeling much more aware of the validity of the subject matter. 2. Big Pharma, and who from big oil to prescription drugs, the level of corruption surrounding the pharmaceutical industry is astonishing. How are these corporations allowed to continue making vast amounts of money the way they are? 75% of funding for the FDA comes from pharmaceutical companies in the form of user fees. I only hope that the newly appointed RFK Jr. will reduce the power of the corporations who are found to be guilty of corporate negligence, placing finance above human life and causing so much unnecessary suffering across the world. Given the amount of unbridled freedom that these companies have been afforded by the political establishment in recent years, it would need a complete shutdown and full independent inquiry to assess the level of corruption, as well as the damage caused to the medical profession on the whole. In a similar fashion, the World Health Organization is aiming to get control of public health worldwide. There are many voices that are opposed to this, and quite rightly so. I firmly believe that our health should be administered by our own chosen GPs, following their own guidelines based on their medical training and experience. Our governments have become too subservient to the large corporations. Many ministers have vested interests and only serve shareholders, which therefore overrules the needs of the people. As Dr. John Campbell, on YouTube/Rumble, rightly points out through his channel, the majority of diseases can be addressed through the use of basic over-the-counter drugs such as vitamin D, as well as other repurposed drugs that are essentially capable of preventing many cancers in the first place. It's very evident from his comment section that many people are adopting and have followed similar guidelines with truly excellent results, and there are many reports of cancer remission after being written off by the hospital following months or years of expensive and damaging treatment. There is a lot to be gained from suppressing information relating to health. So much money to be made. Again, who is endorsed by the censors throughout, using the big tech companies and of course mainstream media to push their agenda forward, controlling our minds and bodies from the womb to the tomb, relinquishing us of our freedom to choose seems to be their mission. 3. Big tech. Some years ago I was accepted, after quite a lengthy online exam, and signing a few ND forms, for an online job. I was kind of desperate, as I'd returned to bricks, after an 18-month period living on the road with little money. The pay was $15 an hour, and I would be one of around 50,000 people worldwide tasked with doing searches online and sending in the results. It would then seem that these results would then be edited and put back out in order to improve the search results. As desperate as I was for money, I declined the offer, as I felt that things were getting a little too crazy already, without me adding to it. I had already become aware of big tech's involvement with the 3-letter departments, so my level of paranoia was already quite high by that time. The fact that Facebook enabled face recognition of photos, without asking any of its users, showed me the audacity of the social media companies. Similarly, Google's integration of AI into their search engine and Microsoft's Copilot in Windows, and previously Cortana for that matter, as well as Amazon's Alexa, has put an end to any kind of privacy. I must congratulate them on their achievement of setting up the kind of intelligence infrastructure that Big Brother would have been proud of, and all paid for by the user. A masterstroke of genius. Meanwhile in Germany, a guy retweets a meme calling a politician an idiot and is promptly arrested in a Stasi-style house raid for breaking the federal law of hatred. True story. I've never liked the way that FB suggests friends that you may know. Even when you try to disable the feature, it pops back up. We clearly have little to no control over the content that we are served. I can imagine some bright spark coming up with this idea, in order to further add information to the extensive relationship database that they have on file already. According to our interests, I have found that joining groups that maybe go against the mainstream narrative mean that you have to endure posts from more official sources. This is a clear Adjustment Bureau style action in which they feel the need to re-educate you, and of course save you from yourself. I've never trusted Apple, after reading the level of exploitation that goes on through their factories in China. The hardware and OS has ruled the mobile phone market and continues to do so. Needless to say that they implemented client-side scanning. Instead of getting your data and spending vast sums of money processing and evaluating it, they now do it on your device and the telemetry sends them. Of course, they will proceed to share the data to the highest bidder, without your knowledge that anything has happened. You'll just go about your daily life, unaware of the fact that every move, every decision, every meeting, is being recorded and the data used to form further mind control maneuvers. The low-level Bluetooth service, which is enabled even if Bluetooth itself is disabled, is yet another way that big tech can scan whose phone you are near to, thus establishing a sizable network of people for any use a government or three-letter agency will see fit. More info regarding this can be gleaned from Rob Braxman's channel on YouTube, Rumble, or Odyssey. He goes into a lot of detail, but in such a way as to make it interesting, and perhaps a little scary. Just to point out that he lived under the CCCP, so knows a thing or two about governmental control and censorship. It is of course possible to de-Google your phone or buy one that's more privacy-focused, as well as moving to a Windows-like version of Linux, such as Mint, with much less chance of losing any privacy that you may have left. Although by now I'd imagine there are more draconian measures being tested as the use of unbridled AI becomes more widespread. From the cars that we drive to our automated vacuum and our smart homes, everything is sold to us in the guise that our lives will be so much better. Of course it will be better, but not in the way you think it will be. If the same corporate mindset has anything to do with it, we will be subservient to whatever agenda the government agencies want to push upon us, and big tech will play its part in this agenda. A side note to this was how technology was used against us during the pandemic. The whole track and trace fiasco was merely a chance for them to see exactly what their system was capable of, all in the interest of public health, of course. Enforcing lockdowns now means that your technology is now your master, and you must obey it. Imagine what it's like for a criminal having an electronic tag on your ankle to restrict your movements 24/7. Well, your phone is pretty much that already. I'm often fascinated by the notion of a prison without bars. Fast forward to the near future, where we all have electronic chips inserted, for our safety of course. And of course Elon's hive-mind BrainLink hooked up to the cloud. Watch this space. It would appear that the current generation is likely to view these procedures as a cool thing to be part of. Elaborating further on the level of control we find ourselves in, at an ever-increasing rate, it's hardly surprising that the Matrix-style reality seems to be present in our lives. The level of control of the technology is the same as in all other aspects of our lives, assuring corporations not only control the level of tech that we have, but also in the way that we consume it. Social media, mainly being driven by the ego and the constant need for validity, a basic but important human need, has almost completely replaced genuine human interaction with a purely artificial version. It's therefore hardly surprising that an individual's identity has become so eroded and mental health has suffered in so many ways, especially within the last few decades, with levels of depression and anxiety previously unknown. I dare say that television also played a role leading up to this, with many parents putting their children in front of the tube whilst doing the housework. Instead of perhaps playing with toys or interacting with the world, the infant would shut down part of the developing brain and soak up whatever was being projected on the screen. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure each technology has its benefits as well as its more negative effects, but it's likely that the television was used more for nefarious uses than for the benefit of the observer. Keeping the population dumb and less likely to think freely, and perhaps lacking real creativity, it has led to many minds being robbed of the ability to think original thoughts, and allowed many aspects of their lives to be controlled and exploited. There are some cultures around the world that have managed to retain their sense of identity at the familial and societal level, whilst others seemingly become watered down, and the link to any cultural identification becomes a carbon copy with each successive generation, as the modern technological era becomes more dominant. This is perhaps more evident with the adoption of mobile phones, which has greatly reduced human interaction to a series of 20-second clips, and much more distraction than television could ever have achieved. If a message needs to be put out there, Even if the message is a complete fiction, it's possible to create a viral wave of fear to billions of people simultaneously. The thing that television lacked, aside from the set-top viewer count boxes and the remote red button, is the ability for the user to fully interact. This gives big tech the ability to passively interface with the human mind, and therefore not only to control the visible consumer products available, but also to push whatever narrative their controllers and governments want to portray. Obviously, the news programs on the box extended from a 10-minute slot into a full morning of distraction for those that hadn't yet adopted the small screen. 4. History. Owing to the fact that the victors write the history, I feel it's so important to realize that there are often many sides to the past and many truths that are simply buried, for both political and cultural reasons. Let's face it, if the conquering side has a few truths they want to keep away from the public, it's an opportune time to remove and change information that could later paint a far different picture. Donning my tin-foil hat once more, here are a few things that, thanks to the good old internet, has awakened my curiosity. A little at least. Tartaria and old books/maps. Seriously, check this out if you have the spare time. When a friend mentioned this, I was very skeptical. However, there is so much that has been written and observed in old textbooks and photographs, it does beg further investigation and an open mind. There are several prominent channels on YouTube that cover the subject better than I ever could, as well as looking at the truly amazing buildings of the world's fairs, whereby most were demolished after the prestigious events took place. I've seen many buildings in such places as Chicago, whereby the old architecture is covered up by modern red brick and repurposed into post offices and such like. As many of these buildings are now being stripped, there are many beautiful structures being uncovered right across the world, all showing the same style of features and grand architecture. Similarly, many of the buildings seemingly extend well below pavement level, and in some cases have vast tunnel networks below them. It's also worth pointing out that with the advent of AI, there are some people that are producing images that are 100% fake, so beware the bad actors. Often a simple image search of the same picture will lead you to the original, in part, as many AI engines utilize actual images in their datasets. Many of these buildings exhibit very short build dates, often less than 12 months to complete. Given the scale and excellence of their construction, one has to beg the question as to where such architectural wonder has gone in modern times. Another topic that I've always found fascinating is the theory of the Earth's power, supposedly linked via ley lines, often running through buildings such as churches and archaeological sites. Many churches are also built upon several incarnations of places of worship, far predating the current building by many centuries. It begs the question that as religion has been altered over the centuries to conform to what I describe as the conquering or bastardized belief, as to whether these sites perhaps held much greater power and have since been neutralized from the earth in some way. Just a thought. 5. Antarctica and beyond. Another fly in the ointment for me is that with all of the economic turmoil and saber-rattling going on in the world, somehow most of the countries in the world can come together and create an agreement to preserve the Antarctic region, a landmass of 5.5 million square miles. The Antarctic Treaty was signed in Washington on December 1, 1959 by the 12 nations that have been active during the IGY: Argentina, Australia, Belgium, Chile, France, Japan, New Zealand, Norway, South Africa, United Kingdom, United States and USSR. Bearing in mind the report of Admiral Byrd during Operation High Jump during 1946-47, speaking about a great land full of resources, following Operation Deep Freeze in 1957 when he established permanent bases on the continent. There is a very compelling theory regarding a secret underwater German base, as the Nazis, see Thule Society, were fascinated by the Aryan race that supposedly resided there. Given the dates and the amount of US military craft used in the exercise, it's definitely something worth a look into. Although, as I stated in my first part, there has been heavy modification of search engine results, with the AI now pushing the official narrative down your throat for you. Bringing things back up to date, in our current climate of multiple UAP sightings, it's probably worth considering the possibility of whether this race is responsible for the current and previous year's sightings. The Foo Fighters were first sighted over Germany by WW-2 fighter pilots. It makes sense to me that these were perhaps linked to the German army in some way, and perhaps they imparted information to the Nazis as they were probably more technologically advanced compared to the Soviets and Americans. Check Nazi flying saucers on Google. After the war, the Americans brought 1,600 Nazi scientists across to the US, Operation Paperclip, along with the information regarding the presence of the alien Aryan race perhaps, followed by a large US presence in the Antarctic after the end of the war. Add to this the story that President Dwight Eisenhower supposedly met with an ET in February 1954 at Holloman AFB, a meeting which lasted about 45 minutes. It's a fairly convincing timeline and perhaps offers some kind of explanation regarding both Antarctica and the current UAP sightings, both of which the US government and perhaps other inner circle governments know the truth about, and about which choose to remain silent. If I think there's more to offer up, I'll continue to do so. Thank you for watching.